If you're 55, 62, or already retired, let me ask you something simple. Do you actually know how much you can safely spend this month without putting your future self at risk? Not a guess, not a gut feeling, an actual number. Most people don't, and that's not a knock on you. It's just how retirement sneaks up on us. One day you're earning a paycheck and saving is the whole game. Then one day the paycheck stops, and suddenly every dollar you spend is a dollar you're not making back the same way. That shift messes with people. Some freeze up and underspend, missing out on the retirement they worked for. Others keep spending like nothing changed and don't notice the problem until the numbers get scary. Here's the good news. You don't need a finance degree to get this right. You need a handful of checks, the same ones financial planners walk clients through, and about 20 minutes of honest attention. So before you spend another dollar, I want to walk you through the things worth checking first. Not to scare you, to make sure the money you do spend, you spend with confidence instead of a knot in your stomach. In this video, I'll walk you through 5 things to look at before your next purchase, your next big trip, or your next should I retire now decision. Real numbers, real examples, nothing invented, nothing sold to you. Just a clear way to think about spending money you've spent decades saving. Let's start with the one almost everyone gets wrong first. Point 1. You don't actually know your safe withdrawal number. Here's the core idea. Most retirees have a rough sense of their total savings. I've got $650,000 or I've got $1.2 million, but a much fuzzier sense of what that translates to as a monthly paycheck, and that gap is where trouble starts. A commonly used starting point among planners is withdrawing somewhere around 4% of your portfolio in the first year, then adjusting for inflation after that. It's not a law of physics, and your real number depends on your age, health, other income, and market conditions, but it gives you a starting anchor instead of a guess. Imagine a couple, Linda and Tom, both 63. They've got $700,000 saved. Using a rough 4% starting point, that's about $28,000 a year from savings, or roughly $2,300 a month on top of Social Security. Tom had been mentally budgeting closer to $4,000 a month from savings alone, because that felt about right based on nothing in particular. That gap, nearly double, is the kind of thing that quietly drains an account over 10 or 15 years. So here's your action step. Before you spend another dollar, sit down and actually calculate a rough monthly number from your savings, not from memory, from math. If this number surprised you, drop a comment with your current age. I want to see how many of us are recalculating in real time right now. Point 2. You're not accounting for how spending actually changes over time. Most people picture retirement spending as a flat line, the same amount every month for 30 years. That's not how it works. Spending in retirement often moves in a rough U-shape. It tends to be higher in the early go-go years when you're traveling and active, dips a bit in the middle years, and can rise again later due to healthcare needs. Take someone like Dave, 66, freshly retired. His first 2 years included a kitchen remodel, a cruise, and helping a grandkid with tuition. All wonderful. But he built his long-term budget using those early years as his baseline, which means his plan assumes he'll keep spending at retirement honeymoon levels for the next 25 years. That's rarely realistic, and it's rarely accounted for. The action step here, look at your last 3 months of actual spending. Separate out the one-time stuff, trips, projects, gifts, from your steady monthly costs. That steady number is your real baseline, not the exciting first year. Pause for a second and actually check your last statement. Oh wait, that number is more useful to you right now than anything I could tell you in this video. Coming up, we'll get into the 2 mistakes that quietly do the most damage, including one that catches even people who've saved carefully their whole lives.
Point 3. Healthcare costs are probably bigger than you think, and they're not optional. This is the one that surprises people the most, because healthcare doesn't feel like a spending category. It feels like something that just happens to you. But it deserves the same planning as housing or travel. A commonly cited estimate from financial and healthcare researchers puts total healthcare costs for a 65-year-old couple in retirement, including premiums, out-of-pocket costs, and Medicare gaps, somewhere in the range of $300,000 or more over the course of retirement. That's not one bill. That's spread across decades. But if it's not in your monthly budget at all, it becomes a shock instead of a plan. Here's a relatable version of this. Picture Carol, 58, 2 years from retiring. She's done the math on housing, on travel, on her car, but when asked what she's budgeted monthly for healthcare beyond her Medicare premium, she pauses. She hadn't really separated it out. It was just in there somewhere. For a lot of people, somewhere means it's not really budgeted at all. The action step: check whether you have a health savings account, and if so, whether it's fully funded for the year. If you're already on Medicare, call and confirm exactly what your Part B premium, any Part D coverage, and supplemental coverage actually cost you monthly, combined in one number. Write that number down. It belongs in your budget, not in the back of your mind. Point 4. You haven't planned for one big irregular expense, and it's derailing more retirements than people admit. This is the category that doesn't show up in monthly budgets at all: the big, lumpy, irregular cost. A new roof, a car that finally gives out, helping an adult child through a rough patch, long-term care for a parent, or eventually for yourself. These expenses are individually unpredictable, but as a category, they are almost guaranteed to happen at some point in a 20 to 30-year retirement. The mistake isn't failing to predict the exact expense. Nobody can do that. The mistake is having zero buffer for the category as a whole. Let's use a real-life example to bring this together. Meet Richard and Ellen, 61 and 59, both still working part-time as they ease into retirement. They did the first two things right. They calculated a real withdrawal number, around $2,600 a month from savings, and they separated their steady spending from their splurge spending. But when their water heater and a car pair hit in the same month, it wasn't in any category. It came straight out of their fund money, and it stung. Not because the amount was unmanageable, it was under $3,000 total, but because it wasn't planned for, so it felt like a crisis instead of a Tuesday. The action step here is simple. Build a separate buffer, sometimes called a contingency reserve, outside your regular monthly withdrawal number. Even a modest cushion, 3 to 6 months of expenses, set aside specifically for irregular stuff, changes how these moments feel. It turns a crisis into a checkbox. If this is hitting close to home, you're genuinely not alone. This is one of the most common gaps I hear about from people in their late 50s and 60s. It's fixable, and it's fixable today, not eventually. Next, we'll cover the two things that tie all of this together, including the one question you should ask yourself before every single big purchase from here on out.
Point 5. You're treating big purchases as isolated decisions instead of testing them against your real number. This is where everything from parts 1 and 2 comes together. Once you know your rough monthly number, your real baseline spending, and your healthcare and buffer amounts, you have something most people never build: a way to actually test a purchase before you make it. Here's what that looks like in practice. Say you're considering a $15,000 kitchen renovation, or a $40,000 RV, or helping fund a grandchild's wedding. Right now, most people make that decision emotionally. We can probably afford it, without ever running it against the actual math. Take Susan, 67, considering a $25,000 bathroom remodel funded from savings. In isolation, it feels affordable. She has the money sitting there. But when she runs it against her withdrawal number, it represents almost a full year of her healthcare buffer. That doesn't mean she shouldn't do it. It means she should do it with her eyes open, maybe spread over 2 years, or funded partly from a different bucket, instead of discovering the impact 18 months later when her buffer feels thinner than expected. The action step? Before your next big purchase, don't just ask, "Can I afford this?" Ask, "What percentage of my annual retirement number does this represent? And which bucket is it coming from? Steady spending, buffer, or a splurge fund?" That one question turns a guess into a decision.
Point 6. You haven't built in a regular check-in, so small drift becomes a big problem. The last piece is simple but often skipped. Retirement spending isn't a plan you set once, it's a number you revisit. Markets move, health changes, grandkids show up. A plan built at 62 doesn't necessarily still fit at 68. Many financial planners recommend a spending check-in at least once a year, comparing what you actually spent to what you planned, and adjusting your monthly number accordingly. Not a full financial overhaul, just an honest look. Think about someone like George, 70, who built a solid plan at 65. Markets had a rough couple of years, but he never revisited his withdrawal number. He just kept pulling the same amount every month because that's what the original plan said. A once-a-year 20-minute check-in would have caught that early, when a small adjustment is easy, instead of years later when the adjustment has to be bigger. The action step? Pick a date, maybe your birthday, maybe January, and put a recurring reminder on your calendar to spend 20 minutes reviewing your actual spending against your plan. That's it. 20 minutes once a year is the difference between drifting and staying on track. Everyone's situation is different. Your health, your family, your other income sources all change these numbers, so treat everything in this video as a starting point for your own thinking, not personal financial advice. Now let's bring this all together and talk about exactly what to do next.
Let's bring this together. Before you spend another dollar, you want 3 things in place. A real monthly number based on math, not memory. A clear-eyed view of your steady spending versus your splurge spending. And a buffer set aside for the irregular costs that are guaranteed to show up eventually, even if you don't know when. None of this requires perfection. It requires 20 honest minutes with your real numbers, which is more than most people ever give themselves credit for doing. So here's your one action step for today. Open your accounts and calculate that rough monthly withdrawal number we talked about at the start. Not next week, today, while this is fresh. That single number changes how every other financial decision feels. If you found this useful, consider subscribing. This channel is built entirely around making retirement numbers feel less overwhelming and more like something you're in control of. And if you want to know exactly how to calculate your full retirement number step by step in the next 10 minutes, watch the video I've linked next. It picks up exactly where this one leaves off.